Welcome back to Direct Station, where politics are in retrograde. I am Kate Carey. If you've been wondering why an all too familiar mass shooting at a Minneapolis church school hit different this week, or if you've been wondering why the CDC collapse feels like watching something essential die, some final important piece of what America was finally chipping off the whole, or if you've been wondering why ICE detaining undocumented wildfire fighters feels like violating some new level of sacred, or even if you've been feeling tears more available to you inside your face, or if you've been feeling a heightening of despair and sadness about what's happening to the parts of our country most worth protecting, well, naturally, there is an explanation for all of it found in the cosmic weather. So let's talk about that. For those just tuning in for the first time, hi, thanks for coming over. Here's how it'll work. You'll tolerate a little more astrology than you might in your day-to-day, and I will give you a different way to look at what we're living through. Today, we're talking about grief, specifically the grief that comes when power targets the innocent and when the things we hold most sacred, the things that seemed inviolate, start to peel away. This isn't random sadness. This is a cosmic timing. This is an ancient underground reservoir of collective grief that has been there all along, is always there. And this week, as it does sometimes, it became accessible to all of us. We'll do our usual thing. We'll look at the news. We'll look at what's happening in the sky. We'll look at when similar patterns to what's happening up there and down here created similar floods of feeling across history in ways that mimic our cosmic moment. And then we will figure out what we can actually do in addition to the sacred acts of bearing witness and holding a piece of this great reservoir of feeling. So let's talk about what we felt with so much feeling this week. In Minneapolis this past Wednesday, as school children at the Annunciation Catholic School attended Mass, beginning their third day of school in the new school year, an adult pointed a gun into one of the stained glass windows and shattered their lives, their families, their bodies, as easily as any upset person slams a door. 2 children were dead and 17 or 18 others were injured, 2 of them elderly adults. And the response made it worse, because the shooter was a trans woman, and suddenly the right-wing dogmatic theocracy running our country and so much of our media cares not about dead children at prayer, but about having a villain for their culture war. They're using the nightmarish incident to first problematize trans people, and then to declare with no evidence that antidepressants are to blame for these school shootings. So yes, they're blaming trans rights and antidepressants as if other countries don't have those things, as if we're not the only country where children practice hiding from shooters at preschool. Then there's the CDC. Susan Menares, the director, was told to resign after refusing to comply with RFK Jr.'s anti-vaccine rampage of the American public health system. She was ultimately fired by Trump, but in response, all the top scientists, including the chief science and medical officer and the people tracking and studying the management of emerging and fucking zoonotic diseases, which means what you think it means, by the way, respiratory diseases, public health data, the people who spent decades keeping diseases we've forgotten to fear at bay. You know, diseases like AIDS or polio or smallpox, they all just walked. They walked away from their careers, from that institution. Do you know what would need to be true for people who understand the public threat of communicable diseases to leave en masse? Well, that's why it scared and saddened so many of us, as if we were watching a massive limb on a sacred tree suddenly wither and die. That is water breaking through rock. That is the underground reservoir of grief finding its way into our consciousness, deeper and more noticeable than before. Then on the same day as the shooting and the CDC, ICE detained fireworkers working a blaze in Washington state, stopped the crew from its work, and detained 2 of the men, one of whom we know was waiting on the approval of a U visa, which is a visa awarded to immigrants who are able to help law enforcement in the prosecution of a crime to which they have been a victim. But the mercenary migrant collectors did not care about that. They did not care that they were firefighters, that they are people who run towards danger to save us. Post 9/11, firefighters have become sacred in American consciousness. They are the ones who rushed into those towers, and now they are being detained by a government that vowed to care for at least one of them when they also fought crime. That too felt different, as is the news that it was one of the few new acts that the administration is pursuing because it is polarizing, because it is so upsetting to half the country. And so the reservoir becomes more and more and more accessible to us with each blow, right? We can feel grief rising. This all happened on the same day, I saw someone online wondering at the intensity and rapidity and even clustering of these horrors. She said something like, I was worried until I learned about the notion of extinction burst, which is the phenomenon where something maximizes right before it dies, like a species experiencing a population surge right before it ends, or stars turn furiously and grandly into red giants before their final collapse, or the quote thrashing so often discussed in systems theory, which refers to a system becoming trapped in a state of excessive, unproductive activity that actually prevents it from achieving its goals, often right before complete breakdown. And maybe that's right. Y'all, there are plenty of reasons to understand the accelerated march towards an authoritarian state wherein these people are putting years of Hungary or Turkey's decline out of democracy into weeks of this American episode, right? Years of decline in other countries towards autocracy. We're smushing it into weeks. The cruelty and macabre joy at other people's suffering is accelerating because it knows somewhere that its time is ending. And in the meantime, we are all standing in this rising tide of grief, and some of us are even drowning in it. I'm assuming a body or two, or have had a day or two recently where it all felt kind of unsustainable, kind of too much to bear, right? I know it's a lot, and it's supposed to feel like a lot because something cosmic is making sure we can't look away this time. Let me explain what's happening up there. So what's happening in the sky that is creating all these fissures in our usual defenses and our ability to compartmentalize? Why is that superpower working less these days? So here's what's happened. Last Thursday, 3 cosmic forces lined up in a way they rarely do. We've been talking about a configuration of bodies and points that Austin Coppock termed the Great Flying Wedge of Chaos, wherein there are 3 spots in a cosmic triangle that, and by cosmic, I mean up in the sky with bodies up there, right? So there are 3 spots in this triangle that are sometimes perfecting in different corners, but are sort of hovering and moving a bit in this season of great change, hardship, upheaval, and revolution. Each week when we talk, one or the other of these corners in the triangle, which are occupied by 1 or 2 bodies each, have gotten more precise, more sharply exact in relationship to another corner in the triangle. And often on those days, other folks wandering the sky kind of bump into those corners or enter into an exact angle with those corners, and those matter. So there's a ton of geometry in the story as week after week after week of this unfolds. It started in March of 2020. I'll give you a moment to absorb that fact, right? This configuration that we are dealing with, this great flying wedge of chaos that we are dealing with, really gathered in March of 2020. And it's going to hang on for a long time, but it begins to knock off the intensity in September of next year with its climax in February, a little bit into March. So in the meantime, a lot of what we're doing is tracking who has entered one of those exact angles, what the angles signify, and what happens when other bodies wandering around up there get involved in those exact angles. Does that make a little bit of sense? So when they hit a more perfect angle, I'm going to show up and tell you about it because it usually explains a lot of what happened the week before. And when we can look back and go, oh, there was a perfected angle in one of these 3 angles in this triangle, right? So the 2 most familiar characters in the week's story are 1, Neptune, we're starting to know him, 2, Uranus, right? So Neptune, the god of sea, of dreams, of delusions, of the collective consciousness. So when a bunch of us feel or think something, we know Neptune is in play. And I'm sure you've noticed a bunch of us think one thing or another lately, right? There's these factions that are all oriented around a common set of assumptions or a common set of beliefs, right? So in this week's story, Neptune, who runs that collective consciousness, is during these years hovering around what's called a sextile or an opportunity angle, where we, the humans, can be assisted by the relationship should we wish. So Neptune is in this opportunity angle that got precise last week with Uranus. By that, I mean they were at the exact same degree and minute, but two skylands apart. So 60 degrees apart on that giant circle of the sky. And in that opportunity aspect, they are talking to each other. So Neptune's holding our collective beliefs, our feelings, our assumptions, our dreams. And Uranus, Mr. Curveball, is in that 60-degree angle saying to Neptune, hey, you want to get that? You want to get a little extra right now? You want to feel something strong and real and intense and disruptive? And Neptune's like, yeah, I do, actually. So there's a rush of new, strong, helpfully disruptive feelings available through that on the nose sextile angle between these two planets. But that's not all. On the same exact day, two other things happened that made this intense feeling more loaded with grief, more loaded with feeling, more loaded with knowing, more in touch with that great reservoir of human feeling that helps us all know when something is important and true. Let me introduce you then to somebody new, or rather someone ancient we don't talk about very much. White Moon Selena, otherwise known as White Moon Lilith, right? So first we have to talk about what these Lilith points are. So in the moon's orbit of the Earth, there is a farthest point in that orbit and there is a nearest point in that orbit. Black Moon Lilith is that farthest point. So the farthest part away from the Earth that the moon travels, that's Black Moon Lilith. And the closest point in that travel is White Moon Lilith, or White Moon Selena, she's also known as, right? So these two parts occupy this moon orbit, and they both speak to us about different aspects of ourselves. So those points kind of stay in one place, and the Earth moves inside of that orbit, in that sort of imaginary circle hanging in the sky, right? So as we move, those points are moving, and where they are hitting our natal charts or the transit charts day to day. And so something really important happened with the White Moon Selena, or the White Moon Lilith last week. So she is that counterpoint, right? So where Lilith is the wild, rejected, rageful feminine divine, Selena then is the protective mother, the pure feminine wisdom, the one who stands between innocence and harm. I like to think of Lilith as I don't like to think of it. The Maleficent movie represents the Lilith story and the Lilith sort of paradigm so beautifully, because in the beginning, she is this rageful, harmed, exiled, shamed feminine divine, right? She is magical. She is powerful. She is connected to something bigger than herself. And through the course of the movie, as she evolves, at the very end, the very last scene of the movie, she is healed, right? She is the protector of the community in that little sort of Shangri-La that she lives in. She is the protector of Sleeping Beauty. She is the protector of the townspeople and the peace in the land, right? And so she has arrived as sort of a healing aspect. That is White Moon Selena. That is White Moon Lilith. So she still holds that feminine divine rage that Lilith holds, but in this manifestation, she is healing. She is purity. So a clearing is available when she shows up. White Moon Selena softens the ground for our wounds, as we discussed last week, to turn them into wisdom. So right now, Selena's in Cancer, the sign of the mother, the home, the protector. And on Thursday, you cannot make this up, the same day this news about the CDC and the shooting and the firemen all tumble down on us, not as a series of facts, but as a series of blows that we felt more than we've been feeling. So Selena, on that same Thursday last week, finds herself in a direct, exact, precise opposition to Pluto, Mr. Institutional Power, systematic cruelty, the machinery of empire, the planet of intensity, of hard things that challenge and evolve us. Think of it this way. Selena is standing at the door saying humanity will heal from so much harm, and Pluto is the system that causes and then leverages that harm. And these two are staring each other down directly from each other, directly across from each other in the sky. And an opposition is exactly what you think it is. An opposition When I'm across from you at a round table, I'm opposing you, right? And so what does it mean to oppose someone in combat or in chess or in debate or in an initiative I'm trying to cause, right? It means your shit is pushing against my shit. So these two are staring at each other across the sky. She can feel the horror that Pluto knows. She can feel the grief that Pluto brings, and she's eager to heal it. So she heightens our sense of it. She turns to Uranus and she says, are you tracking this? Because she is to Uranus as Uranus is to Neptune. Have I lost you yet? Yeah. So last Thursday, Neptune, Mr. Collective Conscious, is in the 60-degree exactly from Uranus, Mr. Change. And White Moon Lilith is exactly another 60 degrees from Uranus with her collective healing message. So they're leapfrogging, right? So she's in this heated argument with Pluto about harm and healing. And she's turning to her comrades and she's saying, are you guys getting this? Uranus, tell Neptune he should activate the collective consciousness. Humanity's going to need to feel this now, today. Let's go. Enough of this shit. Break it through. And Uranus, who loves to break through stuff, turns to Neptune and says, dude, you should probably hear this and let them all know. Right? So trauma, fighting with grief, and healing, whispering to revolution, and the collective knowing of us all. It's cool, right? Should I say it a different way or one more time? But so Neptune at the end of that chain reaction, who rules the collective unconscious, the shared waters of human feeling. Neptune, the god of the sea, is the reservoir, is that aquifer beneath the surface of the earth, this vast ancient body of water connecting all of us, whether we know it or not. When Uranus delivered Selena's message to Neptune, suddenly, because Uranus causes sudden change, we could all feel it. It moved through us like any element that gets added to water, right? The boundaries that usually keep us dry, keep us functional, keep us separate, that compartmentalization we're so good at, it dissolved just for a minute and we all felt something. This is why it feels unsustainable, intolerable, like something has to give lately, because something is giving. The rock layers that usually contain our collective grief and keep us somewhat separate in our reactions to upheaval are cracking. The water is finding its way up. Hell, the actual very real surface of the Earth is cracking in Afghanistan, which many astrologers predicted last week as a part of this moment, right? Everything is connected, friends. Now you might be thinking, okay, but has this happened before? When have these exact forces aligned in the past? What broke through? I'm going to tell you. Some key elements of this configuration we've got going up there have happened before. And when they have, the world changed. When Uranus and Neptune, for example, made their sextile, their 60-degree opportunity aspect, so same degree, two signs away, two skylands away, in 1965 and 1967, the dam broke and the waters of collective consciousness broke through everywhere. Civil rights workers were murdered in Mississippi. Children were bombed in churches. Students were shot at Kent State. The grief, the knowing, the sense that this is unbearable rose. But that grief became the anti-war movement, became civil rights legislation, became a generation saying, actually, no. Earlier, the same phenomenon, 1938 to 1940, Uranus sextiles Neptune in that 60-degree angle as it is now. And the world is learning about Kristallnacht, about systematic racialized cruelty and violence beginning within a country. Does that sound familiar, right? The tide of human grief at what humans could do begins to break through. That grief becomes a foundation for never again, right? For the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Okay, so that's part of last week's puzzle, Neptune and Uranus. We can see the trend of the people, humanity, starting to say, wait, what? So Uranus, this change agent, and Neptune, this deep thoughts agent, are like, wait, what? Are you serious? So let's talk about the other half of this puzzle. So currently we've got Uranus and Neptune talking to each other in the sky. Let's look at the other half of what's happening in our sky today and understand what it's told us in the past. And then once we understand that, we can kind of put these two things together. So White Moon Selena, opposite Pluto, right? Opposite sides of the sky staring each other down is the other half of what we're looking at. The grief, the knowing horror part of the puzzle. On June 10th through 12th, 2018, White Moon Selena hits an exact opposition to Pluto. ProPublica releases that audio. Do you remember the audio, the recording? We're talking now about families at the border, family separation at the border, 2018. So there's a recording that emerges from inside a Customs and Border Protection facility. For 7 minutes and 47 seconds, we listen to children, babies really, ages 4 to 10, sobbing for their parents, wailing, begging. One 6-year-old girl from El Salvador, barely able to speak through her tears, is reciting her aunt's phone number over and over, hoping someone would call. And over this symphony of children's anguish, you have a Border Patrol agent joking. Sound familiar? Well, we have an orchestra here. What's missing is a conductor, the man says. I remember exactly where I was when I heard this. I was driving. There I sat, so far from horror. I remember having to pull my car over. I remember thinking, this is it. This is the sound that will change everything. I just sat alone in this comfortable car, so far from horror, and the dam broke. It hits like that sometimes, right? By June 20th that same year, just a few days after that, after the release of this tape, after the public loses their fucking minds about these developments, Trump signs an executive order ending family separation. Not because of political pressure, not because of legal challenges, but because the entire nation heard those children crying and could not bear it. And well, he listened for a time. That's White Moon Selena energy. That's White Moon Lilith energy. The pure innocence of children's voices breaking through every defense, every justification, every policy argument. There's no spin that can counter a 4-year-old crying, "Papa, Papa." There's no political ideology that can withstand a 6-year-old desperately reciting the only phone number she knows, the one her people had told her would keep her safe. That's Selena. That's White Moon Lilith. The pure essence that can't be corrupted, that can't be politicized, that cannot be spun. She's the truth teller who doesn't even know she's telling the truth. She just brings us slices of humanity in such stark terms that we are forced to witness each other just being human in the most fundamental way. When these two patterns converge, when Selena opposes Pluto and Uranus sextiles Neptune, when these two puzzle pieces come together, the protective grief becomes revolutionary, right? You've got this event that breaks through. Selena's like, you guys got to see this. You guys got to hold this. I'm sorry. She turns to Uranus and said, make sure they know it. Make sure they feel it, right? The water doesn't just seep, it floods. And it floods in a way that changes landscapes permanently, right? Changes us, changes humanity forever. I studied Tibetan Buddhism for a couple of decades, and my most precious teacher used to talk about this great reservoir of human suffering, the ocean of samsara, they call it. Tibetan texts often describe samsara, the endless circle of life and death, as an ocean of suffering that all beings swim and evolve in together. The Bodhicharyavatara, a seminal text, speaks of an ocean of immeasurable suffering that connects all sentient beings, how it's always been there beneath our feet, how we're all walking on water we pretend isn't there. But when cracks appear, when the water rises, we discover we are all wet. We have all always been in this water. We were just convincing ourselves that we were dry. But this is not just about historical patterns. It's about what we're personally grieving right now, today, right? For me, I'll tell you what crystallized it. You know what got me this week? You know what broke through for me as I touched without trying to all this suffering? Well, here's where I reveal to you that I am currently self-soothing with Aaron Sorkin, as I do from time to time. I'm on season 2 of The West Wing. And that night, Thursday night, when all these things were colliding in the sky and all the news of what had happened on Wednesday was coming, was kind of washing over us. I watched that scene where President Bartlett, who's been concealing an illness that's about to become public, he realizes that his assistant, his personal aide, Charlie, has known about it all along. If you don't love The West Wing, I'm so sorry. Just tolerate this. We'll go on for 30 more seconds. So the president sits with Charlie, who is rocked by this thing coming to light and by having to tell his team that he's known. And he's just sitting next to the president, upset and focused. And Bartlett says to him, Charlie, the more conversations you have with me, the more lawyers you will have to speak to. And they take home more in an hour than you do in a week. So we won't discuss this, except to say this. You're going to be subpoenaed. I'm confident in your loyalty to me. I'm confident in your love for me. If you lie to protect me, if you lie just once, if you lie just a little because you can't stand what's happening to me and the people making it happen, if you ever, ever lie, you are finished with me. Do you understand? And Charlie says, yes, sir. And the president says, say you understand. And Charlie says, yes, I understand, sir. Well, I lost it. Right. I mean, I've seen the scene a bunch of times. It was not new, but it just because there was really a time when integrity and honesty and truth and transparency and decency and leadership mattered that much in this country. Right. You guys, for all of our faults and all of our misses and all of our failures and all of the horror caused by administration after administration after administration, I think there were always a bunch of people operating, governing in that level of integrity at every level of government. It was a mess. It was always a mess, but that value of integrity lived. And I know with everything that I am, it still does. While this cancer of loyalty at all costs seeps into department after department, we still see signs of that integrity every single day. Hell, that's what the scientists said when they left the CDC en masse. First, do no harm, they said. They said they had to leave because harm was becoming inevitable. We have to follow their lead now, more than ever. That same night, I saw this video of this little boy, just this reel. I have no idea who made it. And if you do know, please comment and tell me so I can offer credit. It's this mom making this video of this little boy sitting in the back of his mom's car in his car seat. And she's taping him talking about an active shooter drill and how his teacher in the first week of school, he's 3, taught him how to hide. He didn't like it. And he's working through it with her. And he says, I missed you. It made me miss you. And she said, I get it, but it's just a practice. I want you to practice hiding. And the baby says to her, why can't I just fight the man if he comes? I can fight him. And she says, no, baby, it's not your job to fight that man. You need to practice hiding so that mommy and daddy can come right away and get you. Can you do that for me? And he just stares off and goes, I missed you. And I mean, there I am sitting in my safe, bullet-free life, just weeping into my phone. I am not a crier, I should tell you. I wish I cried more. Honestly, I'd probably have an easier time. But both of these things, this West Wing show and this 90-second video of this little boy processing this fucking reality we've built for him to be born into. Both of these things got me as the breadth and depth of what we're doing to each other just kind of seeped into my consciousness. Thank you, Mr. Neptune, for the message. It has been received, right? You got it from Uranus, who got it from Selena, who got it from Pluto. Thank you. I've received it. What was yours? What was your piece of language or information or audio or video or what image or what feeling got you last week? That's what we're grieving. Not just competent governance, but governance and integrity. The very idea that lying to protect someone you love could be the worst thing. Now lying is government. Now protection requires deception. Now 3-year-olds had to practice hiding instead of being protected by adults who tell the truth. The great reservoir of grief holds all of that. The hope and the betrayal, the dream and the waking up. It's sometimes those moments where tears finally rush to our eyes that we feel ourselves waking up. That was Uranus's goal. So I've told you what happened, why it happened cosmically, when it's happened before. Now let's talk about what we actually do with this rising water. So what do we do when the dam breaks and we're all standing in rising water? First, we take an action. We find someone else who is standing in the water. Don't try to pull them out. Don't try to drain it. Just stand there together. Share what's making you waterlogged. Share what got you. Maybe hold hands. Maybe confess the vulnerability you are experiencing. I heard a bunch of people do it last week. Podcasters, news people, friends. Just saw it popping up all around me that everybody I talked to was just feeling something deeper and bigger last week. What was yours? Have you done that? Have you talked to anybody else about that? The reservoir is less terrifying when we realize everyone's standing in water. This week, find one person and say, I am grieving too. I am grieving for my country. I am grieving for my field. I am grieving for my job. I am grieving for my career. I am grieving for my children. I am grieving for this planet. Like, what is it? What's got you now? That's the whole action. That's it. It's a small and giant thing. I know, but I honestly believe that the more we allow ourselves to confess the feeling we're having, that it's untenable, is the very level of consciousness that is going to drive us to do the inevitable, which is to stop this, to use our own life force, to use our collective grief, our collective action to stop this. Second, I offer you a practice. Every morning before you armor up, before you put on your waterproof boots and you pretend that you're dry, take 5 minutes to feel how you already feel. The grief is already in you. It's collective, it's ancient, it's been passed down through generations. We carry it on from one lifetime to the next. You are not causing it by feeling it. You are creating comfort and intimacy with it by feeling it. You're just finally admitting that you're soaked. You're admitting that you're suffering. You're admitting that this is untenable. Let yourself know it for a moment each day. The water needs to move. It needs to move us. And the more conscious we are of it, the more conscious we are of our own grief, of our own suffering, and of the grief and suffering of our countrymen and women. And by that, I mean everybody who lives here. The more we're going to be ready to move. And third, an inspiration. Maya Angelou stood at Clinton's inauguration in 1993 and delivered her brilliant poem. I can still see it. I can remember where I was sitting watching that inauguration. I remember her standing there. I remember what she was wearing, but I don't remember her words from that day. So when we go back and look at her words now, so many years later, right? Like it was beautiful, it was melodious, it was powerful, it was courageous, but I didn't understand it the way I do today. So listen to this. I'm just going to read a couple of excerpts. And what I want to point out is that this is a poem about America, about what America was, what America is, what America can be. It is also a poem about what Americans are, what Americans have been to each other, all of the bodies who live here, right? And what America can be to each other, to all of the bodies who live here. She starts with this: a rock, a river, a tree, host to species long since departed. Each of you, a bordered country, delicate and strangely made proud, yet thrusting perpetually under siege. Your armed struggles for profit have left collars of waste upon my shore, currents of debris upon my breast. Yet today I call you to my riverside, if you will study war no more. Come, clad in peace, and I will sing the songs the Creator gave me. Before cynicism was a bloody sear across your brow, and when you yet knew you still knew nothing, the river sang on. There is a true yearning to respond to the singing river and the wise rock. So say the Asian, the Hispanic, the Jew, the African, the Native American, the Sioux, the Catholic, the Muslim, the French, the Greek, the Irish, the rabbi, the priest, the sheik, the gay, the straight, the preacher, the privileged, the homeless, the teacher. They all hear the speaking of the tree. They hear the first and last of every tree to speak to humankind today. Come to me here beside the river. Plant yourself beside the river. Each of you, descendant of some passed on traveler, has been paid for. You who gave me my first name, you, Pawnee, Apache, Seneca, you, Cherokee Nation, who rested with me, then forced on bloody feet, left me to the employment of other seekers, desperate for gain, starving for gold. You, the Turk, the Arab, the Swede, the German, the Eskimo, the Scot, you, the Ashanti, the Yoruba, the Kru, bought, sold, stolen, arriving on the nightmare, praying for a dream. Here, root yourselves beside me. I am that tree planted by the river, which will not be moved. Much later, she ends with this. Here on the pulse of this new day, you may have the grace to look up and out into your sister's eyes and your brother's face, your country, and say simply, very simply, with hope, good morning. Dr. Angela knew about the reservoir. She knew about standing in the water of historical grief, and she still said, give birth again to the dream. That's what the water's for, ultimately, not to drown us, but to birth something. Water breaks before birth. The reservoir rising is not just grief. It is also a mother's labor. Something is being born here through our own willingness to feel what we've been so long avoiding. The cosmic weather is telling us the reservoir was always there. We've been walking on water our whole lives, pretending to be dry. This week, the cracks appeared. Selena said no to Pluto's cruelty. Uranus cracked the bedrock, and Neptune let the waters rise. Your tears are not weakness. They are proof that the reservoir is real. They are proof that you are connected to everyone else standing in this water. They are proof that you are human in a time that is trying to dehumanize us all. The 3-year-old who wants to fight the man but misses his mommy, he's all of us, standing in rising water, wanting to fight, missing something we can't quite name, but knowing somehow that this water is going somewhere, that unsustainable things cannot be sustained, that intolerable things will not be tolerated forever. The water doesn't rise for nothing. It is seeking its level, and its level might just be high enough to float us all somewhere new. If you would like to understand how these patterns are hitting your personal chart, how your own spot in this reservoir connects to this collective rising, I offer readings and coaching. My email is in the description. Please do write a review. Many of you have started doing it, and I have so much gratitude about the choice that you've made to do that. It really helps to grow the podcast. It really helps to expand the reach of the conversation we're having. And it is a precious conversation to me, so I thank you deeply for being present in it with me. Until next time, please remember we are all standing in the same water. Some of us have been wet longer. Some of us are just feeling the first drops, but nobody is dry. Nobody ever was. So until next time, be well, be conscious, and be kind. I'll see you soon.